A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms opened in a place I honestly wasn't expecting. Going into this show, I didn't really know what the tone was going to be, or even what kind of story it wanted to tell. After just 42 minutes, though, it became clear that this isn't trying to compete with Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon on scale or spectacle. It's doing something much quieter, and for me, that's exactly why it works. This first episode is less about plot and more about grounding us in who Sir Duncan the Tall is, what he's missing in his life, and why that absence matters. At its core, this episode is about belonging, not the kind that comes from banners, titles, or bloodlines, but the kind that comes from being seen, valued, and having a purpose. And what really stood out to me is how that search for belonging is mirrored through both Dunk and Egg, even though they're at very different points in their lives. The episode opens with Dunk burying Sir Arlan of Pennytree, and right away the tone is set. This isn't a romantic farewell. Dunk doesn't sugarcoat who Arlan was. He talks openly about being beaten, about hardship, about a relationship that wasn't particularly warm. But there's still gratitude there. Arlan took him in when he was an orphan, and in this world, that alone is life-changing. That contradiction says a lot about Dunk. He's not sentimental, but he understands loyalty, he understands debt, and he understands that survival sometimes comes bundled with pain. Sir Arlan was a hedge knight, which already places him on the fringes of this world. No lands, no sworn lord, no real security, just a sword, a horse, and the promise to protect the weak when he could. Dunk, growing up in that shadow, explains so much about who he is. He's lived close enough to knighthood to taste it, but never close enough to truly belong to it. That longing defines him. One small but important moment here is Dunk choosing to keep Sir Arlan's sword instead of burying him with him. Traditionally, that sword would go into the grave. Instead, Dunk keeps it, because to him, it's more than a weapon. It's a symbol. He even mentions how it fits his grip as well as it ever did Arlan's. That line matters. It's Dunk telling himself, and maybe convincing himself, that he's worthy of carrying that identity forward. This is where the line between dream and reality starts to blur for him. Dunk heads towards Ashford with the intention of entering the tourney, not because he's chasing glory, but because he needs money and legitimacy. He has nothing, literally nothing, but 3 horses, and I really liked how the show handled that moment where he jokes that he could eat like a king if he sold them. It's a simple line, but it shows that Dunk isn't stupid. He understands short-term fixes versus long-term survival. Selling the horses solves today and ruins tomorrow. That practicality makes him feel grounded and real. On the road to Ashford, we meet Egg, and to me, Egg is the emotional mirror of Dunk's past. Egg is essentially who Dunk used to be, an orphan, scraping by, looking for someone to take a chance on him. What's interesting is that Dunk initially refuses him. He doesn't step into the mentor role right away, and I think that hesitation is important. Dunk doesn't yet see himself as someone who deserves to lead or guide anyone. He's still trying to justify his own place in the world. There's also a moment at the stables involving a drunken Targaryen who wakes up, looks at Dunk, and says, "I dreamed of you. Stay away from me." That line really stuck with me. In this universe, dreams aren't just dreams, especially when they come from Targaryens. It feels like a quiet bit of foreshadowing. Not loud, not dramatic, just a seed planted. Knowing what we know about this world, it wouldn't surprise me if that dream ties into a future confrontation, possibly even a fight to the death. And if that's the case, it makes this casual, almost throwaway moment feel unsettling in hindsight. When Dunk finally reaches Ashford, the illusion starts to crack. This is where his lack of belonging becomes painfully obvious. His belt is literally made of rope. No one recognizes Sir Arlan's name. No one can vouch for him. And that's all it takes for everything he's built in his head to start falling apart. To enter the tourney, he needs legitimacy. And legitimacy in this world doesn't come from skill or character. It comes from recognition. This is where I started questioning Sir Arlan himself. Was he ever truly the knight Dunk believed him to be? Or was he living in his own version of make-believe, and Dunk simply inherited that fantasy? There's something really interesting about the idea that knighthood might be less about official titles and more about belief. Belief in yourself, belief in your code, belief in what's right. And I think the show is intentionally leaving that question open. It's possible that Sir Arlan never intended Dunk to be a knight at all, and that this dream is entirely Dunk's own creation. That doesn't make it meaningless. If anything, it makes it more human. Throughout the episode, Dunk's loneliness is impossible to ignore. He's mocked for his height, he slouches to avoid standing out. He even tells Lionel Baratheon that where he comes from, he was taught to blend into the background. That line really says everything. Dunk isn't used to being seen, and now that he wants something more, that invisibility is working against him. His interactions with Lionel Baratheon were another highlight for me. There's a purity to Dunk that comes through here. He's awkward, a little out of place, clearly not used to crowds or politics, but there's no malice in him, no ambition beyond wanting to be something, wanting to belong somewhere. That sincerity makes him incredibly easy to root for. When Dunk returns to his horses and finds Egg waiting with food and a fire, it feels like the emotional turning point of the episode. Egg talks about coming from King's Landing, another orphan, another kid just trying to survive. Their similarities are obvious, and I think that's exactly why Egg gravitates toward Dunk. Dunk might not be a knight in title, but he has the heart of one. His moral compass is strong, and you can already tell that it's going to get him into trouble later. In a world that often rewards cruelty and ambition, Dunk's sense of right and wrong feels almost dangerous. The final image of the episode, the shooting star streaking across the sky, is simple but effective. Egg says it's good luck. Dunk says luck alone isn't enough. But when he closes his eyes, you can tell that's exactly what he's hoping for. After a day of rejection, doubt, and quiet humiliation, all he wants is for something to finally go his way. That moment felt very human to me. Not grand, not epic, just honest. As a first episode, I thought this was really strong. What surprised me most was how different it feels from the rest of the Game of Thrones universe. It's intimate, it's character-focused, and it actually takes time to let us sit with Dunk's thoughts and emotions. I came away from this episode feeling like I understood him, and that's not something these shows always manage to do this quickly. I was initially concerned about the shorter episode count and runtime. 6 episodes, some barely over 30 minutes, doesn't leave much room for error. But after this premiere, those concerns have faded. This is a smaller cast, a more contained story, and that restraint feels intentional rather than limiting. 2 things really stood out to me on a technical level. The score was minimal but incredibly effective. It felt almost medieval in its simplicity, with windpipe-like instruments that blended into the environment instead of overpowering it. It added immersion without demanding attention. And the shot choices were surprisingly bold. Harsh cuts, abrupt transitions, moments that leaned into subtle humor. It made the show feel lighter without undermining its emotional weight. Overall, I'm really enjoying the direction this show is taking. It's not what I expected, and I'm glad it isn't. We don't need another sprawling power struggle while House of the Dragon is still ongoing. Seeing this world through the eyes of people on the margins, people just trying to survive and matter, feels refreshing. For the first time in this universe, it feels like we're meant to see ourselves in the characters. If this episode is any indication, this is going to be a story about identity, morality, and what it really means to be a knight when no one is watching. And honestly, that's a story I'm very excited to keep watching.